And the recent string of mass shootings in Miami has garnered national attention.
And while there were some recent arrests, the vast majority remain unsolved. CBS 4's Jim DeFeeti has been digging deeper into the numbers and joins us now with what he's uncovered. Jim.
Lauren, we wanted to really try to understand when we see these shootings, what ends up happening either a week, a month, or a year later. And what we found was not very encouraging. Take a look.
When these homicides and shootings are not closed and there is no closure, whether it's right or wrong, you have parents, you have brothers, you have uncles, you have sisters who, when they know that nothing is happening to the individuals that are doing this, they want to take it upon themselves.
Hilton Napoleon is an attorney for the nonprofit group Parents of Murdered Kids.
I challenge anyone to come into any of our meetings and listen to the horror stories that these mothers and these fathers go through, and they feel helpless because nobody's doing anything about it.
Hilton is reacting to the results of a CBS 4 review of clearance rates for shootings in Miami-Dade County. In the county's Northside District, only 15% of the shootings this year have resulted in an arrest. In the South District, the number this year is just 7%.
15% is just flat out unacceptable. 7% is flat out unacceptable. We cannot have a situation where police officers are out writing tickets or arresting people for marijuana or arresting people for fraud crimes or wherever the case is, and you have a 15% clearance rate on the most serious crime in our country.
Miami-Dade Police Director Freddie Ramirez agrees the numbers should be higher, but says his officers are doing what they can with the information they are given.
Those clearance rates are not indicative of our officers not working. They're indicative of the frustrations and the challenges that our officers go through.
The main problem, he said, is a lack of witnesses willing to testify.
A lot of times when we come across these victims, they don't want to tell you what happened because they're in fear, or if it's in the criminal realm, if it's bad guy on bad guy, that person is thinking he's going to retaliate to that.
The clearance rate for homicides is better, but even those numbers can be deceiving. In 2020, the clearance rate was 39%. So far in 2021, it is 43%. But those numbers include easy-to-solve domestic violence, murder, suicide cases. Officials say the actual clearance rate for homicide cases, like what we've seen in recent weeks, is probably in the single digits or low teens.
What I'm trying to say here, law enforcement can only do so much.
Napoleon said it is easy to tell people to just come forward, but the reality is very different.
Listen, I have a mother whose 16-year-old son survived, okay? He knows who shot him, but you know what the problem is? The person that shot him lives right across the street. She tried to move to get funding to move because the kid has 3 additional siblings who also live there. So now you're asking him, am I going to put my 3 siblings and my mother in harm's way when the person that shot me lives right across the street in the same apartment complex that I live in?
Now, I have to tell you that what Napoleon was saying there, I've heard for years that this is a real problem in terms of keeping witnesses safe. One of the things I noticed was at a press conference last week, Catherine Fernandez-Rundle talked about how her office has the means to and the types of programs that will keep witnesses safe. I have to tell you, that's not been my experience in watching what occurs on the streets. More and more, we're seeing what is really witnesses left for themselves in a large part. At most, what you see are witnesses being maybe relocated to a hotel or motel for short-term stays while a trial might be pending or before they appear before a grand jury. But in terms of any long-term dealings, it's really not there, and that's a problem.
So, Jim, what steps can be taken to actually get people to come forward in a way in which they still feel safe doing so?
So it's a couple of things. One is there's a lack of trust between the community and the police. The members of the community are not sure that the police can keep them safe, can protect them. So one of the things you would think about is in the federal government, you have something like the Witness Relocation Program, where you have major crimes being solved as a result and the witnesses in those cases being relocated. We really don't have anything like that in the state system. Again, we have these programs where you temporarily relocate witnesses, into hotels or motels for short periods of time, but nothing on a larger, longer term sort of basis. We don't see it at the state level. We don't see it at the county level with the state attorney's office. That's one thing that could be done. But again, that's a matter of resources. That's money. So that while you're putting more money into police, this is an area that could also use more money and more will.
Jim, thank you, and great job identifying what the problem is. The answer now is for everybody to come together and come up with some solutions like what you're talking about. Thank you very much, Jim DeFede.